Part 1 of Arc 1 Sprout. I heard somewhere that most babies started to crawl when they were around 7 months old, but I couldn't wait that long. I didn't even care if it was suspicious or not. Do you know what it's like to lie in bed for months, waiting to either get hungry or shit yourself? I learned how to crawl in 2.5, to some applause from my new family. And it was just in time too, because I was running out of ways to keep myself occupied. During that time, I'd practiced concentrating my chakra at specific points during my every waking moment, and after a month of doing that, I was finally able to sense my chakra myself, instead of through my bugs, if just as a kind of warmth. While it couldn't compare to the precision of my swarm's senses, there was something to be said for having internal senses to go with the external ones. Something I'd noticed early on was that chakra didn't flow to every place with equal speed. For a basic example, it took more time and focus to get it to my feet and to my hands. But it also didn't flow with equal ease to every point on my hands. But from the outside looking in, it was hard to tell exactly why that was. With the added benefit of being able to feel it, I could tell it flowed easier not only in certain directions than others, but along certain lines than others. And with the help of my swarm, keeping watch both inside and outside of my body, I was able to get a precise idea of how it flowed through my body and whenever that flowing seemed to be impeded. With some patience, practice, and thousands upon thousands of sets of eyes, I was able to map out a series of lines where it was easy for chakra to flow. Once I did, I began to practice by flowing a focused point of chakra all the way around that system in a constant loop for the entire time that I was awake. And at first, even that was exhausting. It was the type of thing that left my entire body aching and sore by the end of the day, like I just finished an intense workout, to the point where it was almost just as well that I was a baby, because all I wanted to do was lay there afterwards. But I was no stranger to that feeling, given my previous life. And even if I had been, the only other form of entertainment available in my crib was the spinning mobile that slowly rotated and played the same song over and over again, and was slowly driving me into madness. In my first life, running had started off as a form of training and steadily become a cherished hobby, one of the few ways I had to relax and feel at ease when everything around me seemed to suck. It started after Sophia had goaded some boys into chasing me about a month after I triggered, because I'd only escaped because they weren't that invested, and running a block had left me panting. The experience had been something of a wake-up call during a time when I just started thinking about becoming a hero, because you couldn't really live that life and get winded after running 1,000 feet. It takes away a lot of the heroic gravitas when you shout, "Stop, criminal scum! Don't even try to run!" And they do try to run and just immediately get away. I'd started running every morning and every other evening, alternating between that and other exercises to build up my stamina. Necessity had turned to habit, and habit had turned to hobby. And then, life had happened. I'd become a supervillain, fighting for my life on the regular against greater and greater threats. And before I knew it, the end of the world was looming on the horizon, and I trained myself as hard as I could in hopes I'd make even the slightest difference. And while in this life I didn't have the fate of the world looming over me anymore, the life of a baby left a lot to be desired. When your alternatives were waiting for someone to bring the bottle, waiting to make a mess in your diaper, watching the blasted mobile spin, and the occasional gets picked up by a bunch of adults that want to pass you around and make weird noises and faces at you, training hard started looking better and better, and I quickly fell into old habits of pushing myself. After I got used to sending one pocket of chakra all the way around my chakra circulatory system, I upped it to 2, and then 3, and then steadily more. Since my watching swarm lay both above and beneath my skin, I eventually became aware of certain points where my chakra seemed to flow especially easily, and a thorough search of my body eventually revealed a total of 361 such points. Over the course of my stay in Crib Prison, I slowly raised the number of chakra pockets to match, and focused on moving them from point to point in a constant cycle, in the hope that chakra was like a muscle, and that training it steadily would increase it. It was difficult, but I had multitasking powers, so the only actual issue was the strain on my chakra, and I got used to it with time. Again, it didn't really matter if you were left lying somewhere all day when you were a baby, and lying somewhere all day was already most of your schedule. I practiced until I could do that all day, at least at a low level, slowly getting used to adjusting the intensity of each point, until it felt like I was surrounding myself with a warm coat. When I got used to it at a certain level, I raised the intensity of each ever so slightly. Then, partially to practice and partially just to prove I could, I began to vary the intensity of each point, first going high-low, then high-low-low-high, then too high, too low, and several more, and practiced adjusting them on the fly. And then, I ran out of things to do and continued my slow descent into madness, watching the mobile above me twirl and play its stupid song. It took an effort not to just break it with my swarm, even knowing it was a gift from my family. I knew part of the frustration was just the fact that I still couldn't make hand seals, and so even though I was getting better at controlling my chakra, I didn't have any way to use it. But also, baby songs just weren't my mixtape of choice. Rather than put up with it, I let myself drift off into my swarm instead, returning to old habits there as well. I'd have my swarm patrol my territory subtly, keeping track of everyone and everything within it, and mapping out the streets around my family's home. Keeping track of my family members was particularly easy, given that they were all living hives. But I'd gotten very good at marking people with bugs without them even realizing it over the years, and it let me keep an eye on things. Unfortunately, I still hadn't learned more than the basics of the language these people spoke, because I was learning solely by observation, which really limited how interesting my surveillance was. I wasn't old enough yet for anyone to really try to teach me how to speak, though my parents repeatedly said what I assumed to be the words for father and mother. I could still grasp sight and sound well enough, even if I couldn't understand what I was perceiving, but it wasn't the escape I kind of wished it would be. But my new swarm could sense chakra too, and near my second month in this world, I witnessed something amazing. Most of my family were seemingly also chakra users, and many seemed to have a profession that revolved around it in some way, but sadly didn't seem to bring much of that work home with them. One day, though, some of them were coming home, and rather than go through the front door, they walked up one of the walls to get inside. Walked! Straight up a vertical surface, their bodies parallel with the ground and nothing supporting them. The bugs inside them showed me how. They gathered chakra in their feet, which somehow allowed them to stick to walls. I want to do that, I thought, memorizing the sensation. Please, free me from this prison. After training myself to roll over and crawl, I began to practice crib escaping. I wasn't sure exactly how much chakra to use, so I began carefully, figuring it was better to undershoot it than overshoot it. But, perhaps because of the chakra training I'd already done, it was easier than I thought, and I was able to adjust the flow enough to allow me to safely climb the bars of my prison on my hands and knees. To be safe, and because falling out of my crib and cracking my head would be an incredibly embarrassing way to die, I spent the first few days just holding myself slightly above the crib bedding, ready to fall safely back onto it if I ever lost control. And then I escaped my bondage, and spent the next month crawling up the walls mentally and physically, whenever my new parents weren't watching, sneakily returning whenever they woke up or came home. Finally having a way to use my chakra was nice, and, meager though it might have been, so was having the chance to move around freely. But in the process, I encountered a new issue with using my chakra. I'd already realized that both amount and control of chakra mattered, but in order to climb up walls, I had to emit enough chakra from the points on my hands and knees that they began to hurt after a while, presumably because of the strain. See, to make up for the limits of my baby's body, I'd been cheating a bit. I only had so much chakra, and even before learning to crawl up walls, I'd had a lot of things I wanted to do, as well as a lot of mouths to feed. To make up for that, I'd been having my swarm skim a bit off the top of people passing near our territory. I didn't take much, because I didn't need to. Most people, it seemed, couldn't use chakra at all, but adults still had more than babies, and spread across enough people, I was really taking almost nothing to restore myself to full, and they didn't even notice. In practice, it proved a bit more complicated than just having my bugs take it from someone else and giving it to me, but not that much more complicated. The bugs in my swarm naturally exchanged the chakra that was their food, scavengers spreading it to those in the hive like bees and ants did, and I was able to feel precisely how that felt from both sides, and with some focus, managed to imitate it. In fact, it came so easily that I almost wondered if it was natural for people to exchange chakra too, but I hadn't seen anyone else do so. But while that resolved the issue of my reserves, channeling an adult's level of chakra multiple times a day left my circulatory system and body aching, compounded by the strain of finally moving my body. It wasn't anything I couldn't endure, but a full body ache didn't make the day-to-day of babyhood any better. I was pleased, even excited by my achievements, but the mornings after tended to leave me in a foul mood. Maybe that's why I got reckless. During my 5th month in this world, I got caught, and it was my own fault. Having learned to walk, I got excited when another member of my family unknowingly showed me that walking on water was possible as well. So one day, when my parents were out of the house, doing something on the other side of our family's compound, I escaped my crib, unlocked and opened the doors between me and an open window with my swarm, and crawled my way outside towards a small little ornamental pond right outside the house, and attempted to walk on water. I want to be clear, I wasn't stupid. I made sure to practice somewhere shallow, where it would be safe even if I failed, and had observed several members of my family do so, inside and out. I knew that the difference between climbing walls and walking on water was that the flow of chakra for the latter would need to be adjusted constantly, and I'd already practiced that in my crib. Not only that, but before climbing on the water fully, I spent several minutes laying my hands on it, getting used to the feeling until the water became an almost solid surface beneath my palms. What's more, I succeeded, like I'd known I would. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that I'd underestimated the people of this world. I thought that, given my awareness of the bugs in their bodies, I could easily avoid being spotted by anyone in my clan, and even if my parents were in the compound, they were too far away to notice anything anyway. And so, I was slightly taken off guard when my father spotted me out of the corner of his eye from nearly half a mile away, apparently saw me on the water despite that distance, and had moved so fast that he covered that ground in half a second to pick me up.